There is a very famous psychologist who has a dictum, right? And his dictum was that there is nothing more practical than a good theory. Okay. Context matters a lot more in the kind of research that we're doing, right?
Correct.
So the findings and the ideas that are there in some of the West might not be immediately applicable here because the context is somewhat different.
There is an absolute need for stories and research which is very India specific.
Of course.
By what time do you think we would be able to actually have some very strong research? If we switch and talk about researchers, do you think there's a lot of appetite for being a researcher today in India? Hi, and welcome to this special episode of ISB Discover with production partner HT Smartcast and Newsreach. My name is Sonali Srungaram, and I'm your host for today and a very proud alum of the Indian School of Business. Dean, it's always wonderful to spend time with you, and thank you so much for doing this today. And first of all, congratulations on the launch of ISB Discover. I know you've been very passionate about research and especially ISB's role in this. So I think I'm very pleased that this is finally becoming and going live. So congratulations once again.
Thank you, Sonali. Thanks also for doing this. You were in my class, and you know this passion about research goes back a long, long way.
Yes.
And ISB primarily is about research, and I'm really glad that we're launching this because in addition to doing the research, it's also very important that we disseminate it, and that's what this platform is going to do.
No, but always a pleasure to come back. Alma Mater always has a very close and a very wonderful place in my heart. Prof, ISB Discover, we've been talking a lot about it, but from your perspective, what would be a simple yet effective definition of what ISB Discover is, and who would be benefited from ISB Discover?
So there's a lot of great work that happens in ISB. We thought we'd like to create a platform where people will benefit from the knowledge that is being created here. So we have a very broad view about who's going to benefit from it, and there are various ways in which we are going to be disseminating it. So we think thoughtful practitioners, leaders, CXOs, anyone who's interested in a rigorous examination of ideas, they'll find something of value in what we do. Students, policymakers, journalists. So the spectrum is quite wide, as is the way in which we're going to be presenting it. Right? It just won't be a place where you'll have research papers. There'll be translation of the research papers. There'll be video bites. There'll be infographics. There'll be podcasts. So all of the different ideas that are being generated and talked about in ISB, we're trying to put it on a platform that others can benefit from.
So a much more palatable form of consuming and digesting all this research and the information that comes from it.
Exactly.
Prof, bit of a fundamental question from my perspective. In the line of work that I've been either through consulting or now in entrepreneurship, everybody talks about understanding research or knowing what research is. But if you speak to everyone and delve a little deeper, everyone's definition is very different. So there are those who believe research is theoretical in nature. Some think research should only be practical and relevant. Some say research should be global. Some say unless it has a local flavor, it's not going to be relevant. From that standpoint, I mean, your definition of research, how would you define what you think research is and how it should be relevant to people today?
So, I mean, great question, Sonali. So, so research comes in various shapes and various sizes. So, what is the kind of research that happens in ISB? So while broadly you'll characterize it as academic research, it's research that is being produced by academics, is being reviewed. This is what peer-reviewed by academics, and then it goes into journals that academics primarily are the readers.
That's what we assume research is.
So it is that. But we are a business school. Ultimately, the value of the research that is being produced here is going to be determined by, is this research being used to solve some real problems, right? So is it studying real problems? And therefore, is it offering ideas about the way that you can tackle real problems? So they cannot be research in a business school that you will say is only theoretical, okay? Does it mean that there will be no theory in it? Of course, there'll be theory in it because theory is very simply, the way that I see it and the way that a lot of people in a business school will see it, theory is an explanation of what the phenomenon that is going on there, a rigorous explanation and a generalizable explanation. Okay, and let me just give you, illustrate, right? So let us say that I see a pattern of behavior, okay, and it is entirely possible that that particular pattern of behavior will replicate in many times, so again and again and again. So in the sciences, for example, I'll be seeing the sun rise in the east, okay, so and I'll predict that it will rise in the east. After having seen it 10,000 times, then it will rise again in the east, right? But till such time as an explanation was offered for it, why exactly are we seeing that particular phenomenon the way that we are, we can never be sure that that pattern will repeat itself, right? So we need an explanation for it, and we need to buy into that explanation, right? So that's what a theory is. But in a business school or anywhere else, so in the social sciences in general, there is a very famous psychologist who has a dictum, right? And his dictum was that there is nothing more practical than a good theory. Okay? And that's what it really comes down to.
Yeah. No, I think fair enough, because we normally, when we talk about research, I think research in fields like physics, natural sciences comes to mind. But people find it difficult to relate to. So your perspective that unless research coming out of B schools is relevant, usable and tangible, and people can digest it and use it, then I think it will not have the same flavor or what it should be and how it should be intended.
Totally. So, Sonali, I also a little bit, right? So there is also very, very fundamental research because in the sense, this basic research, which you don't know the immediate value of it and the immediate practicality of it. Less of it will be done in a business school, but it can still be done. That's out there. So I'm not saying that it's readily usable. I'm saying that it needs, so readily usable versus relevant, I'll make a slight distinction, right? But the point that you also make about relevance, right? So one of the questions we ask ourselves, as a school, there are great research schools all over the world, right? You know them, I know them. In fact, some of them were founding partners of the school, right? They were the ones who established the school. So why was there a need for doing some research in India, right? And why was there a need to have a research school in India? Unlike engineering or the sciences, and I'm being a little, simplifying things a little.
Absolutely.
But I think context matters a lot more in the kind of research that we're doing, right? So the findings and the ideas that are there in some of the West might not be immediately applicable here because the context is somewhat different, right? But what was felt at the time the school was started, and you're one of the early people who took a bet on the school, what was felt at that point was that we could use those rigorous ways of conducting our research, but we could use it to problems that are relevant to India and the Indian context. Okay, so that was what was felt was the need at that point in time, and that's what ISB became. So the point about relevance is very well taken, so we needed it to be relevant, and which is what we're finding.
No, absolutely. And I think from what you mentioned, Prof, going back to the year where I did my PGP program, 03-04, there was a lot of course, all study in ISB is based on examples and research that is happening out there, or in our time that was happening. But a lot of those examples were about research having been done in more developed economies at that time. And I can understand there was more happening, like you said, at that time, whether research and relevance have a lag or not. Sometimes it happens. You might have a topic of interest. But I find now with the work that I do as a healthcare entrepreneur or interacting with our ISB's IV program students and entrepreneurs, there is an absolute need for stories and research which is very India specific.
Of course.
Do you think it would take us a long time to try and bridge the gap? I know it's a lot of work that's been done and we are doing a lot of work, but by what time do you think we would be able to actually have some very strong research that the students, entrepreneurs or policymakers now would be able to use and deploy?
I think it's already happening, Sonali.
Okay.
I'm actually the thing that I'm a very big optimist about.
I think we've all been infected by that optimism of yours.
So it's happening, right? So if I look at so ISB was a bit of a pioneer when it came to India, when our emphasis on research and so on. But you see the Indian business school ecosystem. You see there's a lot of good work being done by others also in India. It's not just us who's doing it. Right?
Absolutely.
I'd like to think that we are the best at it, but there's a lot that is going on in India, which is rigorous, which is relevant, and so on. So that body of knowledge that you're talking about and that you're saying that needs to be building up is building up. And it actually is building up. Just coming there, Sonali. So even within what you do, right? So and I know what you do and so on. So we have a healthcare institute here. We have one of the world's leading researchers when it comes to healthcare, especially when it comes to healthcare and operations, right? So some of the research that he's doing, when you've seen it also, and I'm talking about Professor Sarang Dev, some of the research that he's doing is cutting edge completely. It gets published in the top journals, but the data is Indian and the questions are Indian, right? So for example, and this is squarely in your domain. So he had a recent paper about these telemedicine centers, right, for eye care. Right? And it's a question that is there in the West also, but is of more relevance here, where healthcare, like what you do, healthcare delivery is patchy. Access is limited. Then how do you increase the access? But at the same time, you don't have the ability to create all kinds of infrastructure everywhere. So then you use technology in various ways. So he studied that particular problem in India, and it was about eye care delivery, and just again at the risk of simplification, some of the findings that he had are fantastic in the research that they've done, and it can be used in not just for policymakers in India, but also policymakers in other places where they have infrastructure, they have limitations in infrastructure, and they are a little poorer than the Western models and so on, right? So very quickly, his finding was, and this is with Arvind Eye Care. So they're and without going into all of the analysis and so on, the entry of them with these telemedicine centers that were there, it led to a dramatic increase in the number of people coming to those medicine centers for minor problems, not for the major problems. Major problems, you'll go to hospital anyway, but correcting your eyes and all of these, which translates into a dramatic increase in the quality of your life and so on. Right? So now that's the kind of research I'm saying, right? So that now policymakers can use this research, it can translate to other countries and so on. So that body of work is happening. So now is all that.
No, I'm very encouraged and extremely pleased that it's happening. Prof, you talked a lot about the research that professors here at ISB are doing and professors in India in general are also doing. Do you find that some of the techniques that you might have used, you've had a massive academic and research career spanning more than 3 decades. Some of the techniques you might have used in developed economies, are they always relevant? Do they translate well? I know you must customize a bit, but how much of that can you lean on? Or do you need to have very India-specific techniques in data gathering or publishing? Is it the same or very different?
So methodology-wise, I think we use similar methodologies to what people use there, right? But what you hit upon is another very relevant issue. Not in the domain that I work in. I'm not doing much research these days, but not in the domain that
You're busier with other things. You're busy with bigger stuff right now.
So so in healthcare, for example, there is also in India, data is sparse, right? It's not as much available as in
underreported also.
So then you have to figure ways out of dealing with that. And there are people who've done it here, right? So the methodologies will be similar, but the way that you apply them might be a little different here because the ground realities are a little different for you here.
So you might have to innovate on the techniques, but you're saying in the core of it, you stay true to the methodology completely.
Yes. At least the ones I know. And I might be getting it wrong, Sonali. So I just have to, because,
But do we, I mean, as an institution, Prof, do you come across a lot of resistance in Indian papers being published, or are they very welcoming, saying this is something we didn't know about? And happy to shed spotlight on those bits. So
I think it's changed a lot in the last 25 years. I see about earlier on, because these journals were primarily, they were American journals. They were very interested in American phenomenon and so on. But these days they're very open, right? So another one paper, it's a recent paper, and it's two of our colleagues in operations research, Saharsh Agrawal and Deepa Mani. They published another fantastic study which could have happened in India. They were looking at Uber and Ola, right? This cab hailing kind of apps and the impact that they have on congestion. They took advantage of something that's quite happens in India on and off, driver strikes. So that's a natural experiment that unfolded. And what they found, which is that the lack of those cabs on in these cities, it actually led to a significant reduction in congestion. So in a way, I mean, there are all other kind of things.
But it was there. I mean, that data point, I guess, was there, but nobody shed light on it.
So I'm just saying, and this got published in one of the top journals. It's obviously it's a very interesting finding. They have proper, they have explanations for it. So I'm just saying that there are now journals outside there. If people are creative about what they're going to be studying here, and they study real problems, which have implications, I think they'll find their way in top journals.
No, I think that's absolutely fascinating. And Prof, there is a fallacy which says that researchers normally would be interested in stories of larger companies because they're obviously more known, they're in the news a lot. But India is seeing a huge surge of small and medium-sized businesses. Is there enough appetite for researchers to go and poke their nose in these SMEs and say, hey, listen, I think there's an important story you have to tell, because we believe that if India's journey in the next decade is going to be relevant, then the SMEs are probably going to bolster a big part of the economy.
I agree with you. One is it is under-researched. Okay, so and it's not just here; it's under-researched in various places, but they are the kind of the backbone of the Indian economy. So there's a lot of scope for us to study that, to study small and medium enterprises. There's a lot of scope to do much more work in family businesses. Because in India there are we have a large number of family businesses. And very successful ones. So there's a lot of work that can be done in and around that area. So these tend to be a little under-researched areas. But you're right, that these are ones that. But ultimately, faculty are going to choose what they want to study.
True.
We can't drive them to do it.
No, you've been a big proponent of, as you called, academic integrity. Each one should choose, the topic of research. So, Prof, slightly self-serving maybe. So, if researchers are looking for interesting companies, can interesting companies reach out to those researchers?
Of course.
Okay.
But then they have to be very willing to give out data.
True.
Right?
True.
And they have to be very willing for people to publish using that data. Because sometimes when a finding comes out and the company says this is now I don't want others to know on the outside.
True. So it's a bit of a double-edged sword, I guess.
Correct.
But would ISB Discover be a portal through which I guess SMEs could reach out to ISB and say, hey, listen, I might have something relevant. Would you want to take a look?
I hadn't thought about it, Sonali, but absolutely, right? I mean, so now we'll have to think about how we can create a feature there, saying if this idea has interested you and you think that you want to share some data, here is a place that you can contact and so on. Great idea. We hadn't thought about that use case.
Because I was just looking at, and as the team had told me what ISB Discover was going to do, I do think you'll generate a lot of buzz. And when it does, not just from the comments, I'm sure someone's going to reach out. And if there was a filtering mechanism, then maybe there could be something else for some new ideas to come up. Absolutely. But you're right. I mean, I hadn't thought about the perspective that once you go and want to be written about, then you have to be very open to sharing all of that data with you. Yeah, absolutely. Prof, we've talked a lot about research. If we switch and talk about researchers, do you think there's a lot of appetite for being a researcher today in India? because everywhere you look, everyone wants to be an entrepreneur.
Right.
It is a new buzzword. Right. Some will succeed, some won't, but everyone wants to try.
Right.
The good old route of I would want to join academia and be a researcher used to be a very glorious thing when I was growing up. I might be wrong, but seems to have lost a little bit of shine. So we do need very good researchers to provide and do this excellent research. So what is your view on the future of researchers coming out of India?
So one thing which I look at and I say is that academe itself at this point is going to be transformed in ways that we don't know. Okay, it's one of the last kind of industries that has not been transformed for years and years and years.
So you think a change is coming?
I think a change is coming, and I think. I think the way that people consume education and the way that they chase after certifications, all of that is going to be changing. True. The whole business model itself of education is probably now seeing some kind of a massive shift. Actually, is going to happen. Yeah. So then, what kind of research gets done? Who comes into these professions? And will research only be the preserve of academic institutions? I wouldn't know. So. Because when you're looking at journals these days, when you open the journals, you look at their affiliations. Some of the researchers, which has always happened in engineering and in engineering in particular. So you would see IBM people on papers, you would see Microsoft people on papers. True. These days you can see on Econ and others, there are...
most people can produce a white paper at least on...
But even journals, Sonali. So there are, and these are really well-trained, outstanding PhDs are going into these companies because there are tons of data that they can use there. They can run experiments in these companies. Correct. They can do all kinds of things, right? So it is, I don't know where it will happen, but the human quest for knowledge will always be there. True. So it'll happen. It'll happen somewhere. I don't know where.
So you think ISB is geared for this new generation of researcher coming in?
I don't know. I mean, one thing we are geared towards is we are experimenting in the way that we are delivering programs, right? So we are hedging in that sense. We're building up a big capability in terms of the digital delivery of education. So it's not just bricks and mortar, but also digital delivery. So we are, in that sense, I think if you look at, we are well positioned if a transition should happen, that we will be at the forefront of that.
I think ISB has always been very adaptive.
Of course.
I think in its 25-year history, it's not been without its problems or challenges, but I think it's always adapted and it's always done well. So rooting for ISB always. Prof, we talked about the relevancy, you said, policymakers. You talked about people in the business, government, etc. I've realized education is moving so fast in the sense some of the stuff we did at college, students at school do in the 11th and 12th grade. Do you think an ISB Discover sort of platform might be relevant for students who are doing a business management degree? Because this is the time they're thinking about what they want to do and where they want to apply and where they want to go. Could this be something that they could also use?
I think so. I think so. Absolutely. So one thing that did happen, and this is maybe a 10-year-old phenomenon, right? So if I go back to when you were in grad school, you were here, the time lag between what used to happen in journals and what used to come into textbooks and what you used to teach in classrooms and all that was, a few years. Okay. True. And so as researchers, you had a little bit of an edge when you came into a classroom. You knew a few things more than the students themselves. Correct. But the way that the quick kind of dissemination mechanisms that happen, right? Of course, TED is one of those mechanisms through which it happens, and it has varying quality. We'll keep that aside. But the quick dissemination of research, the popularization of a lot of business and social science research, like Malcolm Gladwell was the pioneer, right? So all of that happened. So that advantage for a teacher went away. So they had to find a way to do it a little differently in the classroom. So I suspect that really smart high school students are probably accessing this stuff anyway, wherever they're accessing it. So the way that we have it and the way that the current high school students who are really smart, I'm sure that they can benefit by coming to our platform. If they come, I'll be very happy.
And who knows, you might have one of your future researchers among that lot as well.
Yeah.
So, no, but I think I am very excited about ISB Discover coming out. Anything else, Prof, from your perspective that we may not have covered today that you would like to showcase and highlight about ISB Discover?
I'd just like for people to come and see for themselves. They're going to discover each person. Because of the way in which it's been conceptualized, the way that it is being put together and delivered, I think there is something for everyone in this platform itself. And what people can be sure of when they come to this platform is that they can be sure that whatever is being written there, the content that they're getting there has been rigorously vetted. It's something that has gone through all kinds of steps before it is put out there. So with the humility that all knowledge is at any point in time, it can change. What we think today tomorrow might be a little different. But at least what we put out today will be correct for today. Okay, and we might correct it later on, but it'll be correct for today. So I just say that I'm delighted that ISB is putting its best foot forward. We've always been a research school, and we deserved a platform like this to put it out there so that people can go and they can see it. And I think very many more people will benefit from what is being done here than just the students who come into our classrooms.
Absolutely. I think ISB has had a tremendous legacy of research, and I think ISB Discover is going to be a very important part of it. Prof, I was wondering, we've talked about ISB having a 25-year legacy and research. Everybody talks about why research couldn't have come out in a much more palatable format before, but I know the amount of incredible time and effort it takes to curate all of this. I'm just wondering, is the timing probably quite perfect in terms of what's happening in India now and you having to launch it? I'm not, maybe it is providential in a certain way, but given how many people are looking for answers about what business models might be relevant to the new upcoming India, do you think the timing actually works out quite well for ISB Discover's launch and where India is today?
I think, the question itself contains the answer in some way, Sonali. I think so, right? But I'll add a few more, so I'll add a few more of these. I'm reminded of Pramod Sinha's book, An Idea Whose Time Has Come, right? And I think for this is an idea whose time has come.
Absolutely.
The reason is in order for us to disseminate something, we also need a body of work that is out there. ISB today has many more faculty, tenure and tenure track faculty than it's ever had in its history, right? So when we started off, we started off for absolutely the right reasons. The founders of this institution, the early leaders of this institution, made the point that we will hire only excellent people, which meant that it was a slow accretion of the number of people. So right now we have those numbers. We have the volume of work that is coming out. Okay, so that's one reason. And so people can come there and they can see it. Otherwise, we would not have had the coverage that we currently can have. A second is what you pointed out is the appetite, right? So there is much more in India, and when you open newspapers or when you go into any kind of a news media kind of a site, it's quite clear that people are looking for informed debate. It's clear that people are asking for evidence for things that are out there. So it looks like that there is more of an appetite for that. And finally, it's not just Indians who we think will access what we are doing, right?
No, absolutely.
We think that India at this point in time is much more figuring in a lot of people's, so the mind share of India is quite high at this point. So we think that this is the time for us to showcase what we're doing here. So a whole bunch of people on that.
No, and I think it's a very relevant point, Prof. We are 1/6 of the world's population. But it's not just a question of putting a portal like ISB Discover out there, I guess. Once it's out, it has to be sustained.
Correct.
So if you don't have that critical mass of researchers who are going to constantly bring in new material, then it will probably lose its relevance, the purpose that it was intended for. So I think that from that perspective, it makes sense. You needed to have a body of work to publish, but then again, a constant new stream coming in to keep this fresh and relevant.
Absolutely.
Yeah. But Professor, thank you very much. Dean, always a pleasure to speak to you, and thank you so much for your precious time.
Thank you so much.
Thank
you very much.